The entire Grace Christian Ministries was started by Mrs. Julia L. Tan. She had a unique vision for a school and a church working in partnership, which led her to adopt two slogans. The first is, "The school is the church's mission field," and the church is the school's spiritual home. And the second is, "Separate administration, but a united harvest field."
With this vision, Grace Christian Church of the Philippines was started by Mrs. Julia Tang out of her desire for Grace Christian High School to have a spiritual church home for its students, parents, and community.
When GCHS moved from its Nagtahan location to Grace Village on August 2, 1966, that very Sunday, on August 7th, a worship service was held inside the school in two classrooms on the third floor with between 20 to 30 in attendance.
In less than 2 years, the congregation grew organically from less than 30 to over 100 members, composed primarily of teachers, students, and parents. The time had come to formally inaugurate the little church.
So, on October 27, 1968, Grace Christian Church was formally inaugurated in the school's gymnasium with Reverend Paul Tan installed as its first senior pastor and a board of deacons established. For several years, the church used the school facilities for worship and other activities until the new sanctuary was built.
When there were a little more than 150 members, our church leaders, by faith, decided to build a worship center that seats more than 1,000 people in preparation for a future when God would fill the sanctuary with people eager to hear His word.
Praise the Lord for their faith, vision, and sacrificial giving. Construction began in late 1973, and on January 26, 1975, the church sanctuary, fellowship hall, and office parsonage building were formally dedicated. For over 40 years, the worship center has been fully utilized for school chapels, baccalaureate services, evangelistic and revival meetings, missions conferences, teaching seminars, and weekly weekend worship services.
Our church actively worked to intentionally carry out the Great Commission of Christ in our Grace community and to the communities surrounding us. We saw the impact of many ministries such as the children's ministry and youth ministry, which produced many of our current deacons and elders today.
Another contribution to the community was the publishing of the Grace Hymnal in 1981 under the guidance of our senior pastor, Dr. Paul Tan. The Grace Hymnal is a vast selection of more than 1,200 hymns translated into Amoy Chinese. This labor of love from the skilled hands of our very own church members was used by Filipino Chinese churches all across the Philippines and even in churches across Asia.
Even with many spiritual accomplishments, our church was far from being a perfect church. We experienced many challenges and difficult times, especially when we lost sight of our God-given mission and vision. We even experienced many heartbreaking departures from our church. Yet, even with our shortcomings, God was gracious to allow our church to continue to exist and even flourish.
By God's grace, this past decade, GCCP has seen a wonderful spiritual revival as the church grew from an average attendance of 450 adults and children to more than 1,700 through a commitment to Bible expository preaching, the implementation of the church's original mission and vision, and by creating and fostering a church culture that is truly biblical.
Grace Christian Church grew from originally having just one worship service to now having 4 worship services to meet the needs of a growing church. Our first 3 church elders were installed in 2008, and 3 more church elders were installed in 2017 to bolster the spiritual leadership of our church.
We praise the Lord for the more than 40 pastors and ministers, more than 120 elders and deacons, and more than 30 staff and co-workers, and hundreds of countless members and volunteers through our 50 years who serve the Lord in various areas of ministry, as unto the Lord.
Now, with more than 2,000 adults and children entering our doors every week, which includes students and teachers attending the GCC Sunday School, we thank the Lord for the fulfillment of Mrs. Julia Tan's original vision for the church and the school. We look back on God's goodness and grace to our church and look forward with exciting anticipation to see what God will continue to do through GCCP.
On this 50th founding anniversary of Grace Christian Church, we remember the many spiritual milestones throughout the history of our church by God's grace, challenging us as a church body to live for His glory. I'm Dr. Stephen Tan, Senior Pastor of GCCP. Here at Grace, we believe that the church is to be a community for those who want to know more about Jesus Christ or want to know better the truths of the Bible, are welcome whatever your life stage and wherever you are in your faith walk. At this church, we will encourage you and equip you to live out your faith authentically in your family, in your community, and in your various spheres of influence. To enable this, we as a church strive to be faithful to what the Bible has called us to do, to worship together, to spiritually grow together, to be in community together, and to serve one another. We want to make a spiritual impact in our generation and in our community as the Lord enables. This is GCCP, where we remember God's grace and where we live for His glory.